folks, and welcome back to the Path to Recovery podcast. We're on episode 10, and the topic today is all about boundaries, setting boundaries for our safety. Since this is going to be a very long podcast, we're going to split it up into two parts, and you're currently listening to part one. We'll try and make it as clear as possible when it comes to boundaries. As we're going through recovery programs or recovery processes, we end up hearing that term or the phrase boundaries, setting a safe place, a safe area, safe distance, understanding that we don't want to put ourselves in those situations again, so we have to create these walls, basically. A healthy boundary is a place where we can be safe by applying limits to those outside influences. An unhealthy boundary is a place where we can get run over by those same outside influences. That's a basic way to understand boundaries. Setting a healthy boundary is kind of like putting up a divider between us and the things we really want to say no to. A healthy boundary will define our comfort zone between us and the people or things that we interact with. An unhealthy boundary will allow people or things to be in our space and to partake in a very uncomfortable moment. Boundaries create kind of like this imaginary line, some folks call it a veil, between our comfortable and our uncomfortable moments. So we need boundaries to build our confidence as we continue down the path to recovery. They're going to provide us a stopping point for pain or hurt or emotional stress so that we can create a more healthy environment for us to live in. It's going to provide us with assistance to free ourselves from our addictions, especially if our addiction has taken over us. So I'm going to run through an example or two of a healthy boundary. I will not hang out with Bob as he tends to want to get high all the time and I want to stop. So I guess you ask yourself, why is it healthy? Trying to stop getting high requires strong commitments to changing your environment, especially the ones we tend to be in when we usually get high. So to say, I will not hang out with Bob is a healthy boundary. Another example is if my wife or husband or significant other won't meet me halfway in something, I will leave. In other words, if somebody's not willing to work with you that you care about and that you're having a relationship with, your boundary is to get out. Okay, so why is it healthy? If you respect yourself enough to take action when you see that your unhealthy relationship is dead and irreparable, then we can move ourselves from it immediately and solve the problem. Some of the hardest things to do is leave a relationship, even though it's the most unhealthy thing that's in our life. Another example, I will not stop off at the liquor store tomorrow after work. So why is this healthy? Simple. Making a solid commitment is key to changing and stopping bad habits or your addictions. I will not stop off is a strong commitment to healing from it. Another one. If my boss makes fun of me again, I will find another job. Why is that healthy? Sometimes public humiliation is an unacceptable action and requires absolutely no more chances. Committing to standing your ground and making the change is powerful and very healing. We tend to fear the leaving of something like our job because it's money. We need money. We have to have rent. We have to pay our bills. But at the same time, if you keep allowing abusive behavior towards yourself to occur, then it doesn't matter how much money in the world you're going to make. You're going to be miserable. Another example, I will find a shelter to live in today. We don't even have to guess why this is healthy. If we're in a situation where we have nowhere to live, we have to put a roof over our head, why is it healthy? A positive approach to being safe is critical, even when we are in our deepest despair. I will means that we are committed to finding a solution. I will find a shelter to live in today. It doesn't mean you're going to just kind of casually go about it. You're going to actually put effort and focus in making sure that you have a shelter, something to cover you up. Another healthy boundary. I will find other things to do other than texting all day. Cell phones, folks, are a major addiction for people. If we're getting off a drug, if we're stopping drinking, if we have other addictions like food or something else, we tend to substitute one addiction for another. And a lot of us, as we're seeing in the last 5 years, majority of the people with problems in addictions is the cell phone. So I will find other things to do other than texting all day. Why is that healthy? Well, when we address our addictive behaviors, we can eliminate them by limiting how often we do things. So limiting our behaviors can lead to stopping them altogether. How about this one? You probably heard it or experienced it yourself. My boyfriend, girlfriend hit me, so I am leaving now. Do we have to guess why it's healthy, folks? Physical abuse is never acceptable. Ever. No matter how much we think we need somebody in our lives, there is nothing on this planet that is acceptable when it comes to physical abuse. So committing to leaving immediately is a healthy decision and ultimately a safe one. How about this one? I need 30 minutes each day to unwind and just relax. Absolutely healthy. When we're trying to self-heal, it's a great way to continue to stay healthy and not to let things get to us. With strong commitments to happy moments, we can see the light more clearly at the end of the tunnel. If we miss our 30 minutes, remember folks, it's okay. We just try harder the next time. When another moment comes up and we put ourselves into a stressful situation, if we can't find the 30 minutes to just recover and heal, it's okay. We're going to get another chance. It's called practice. Another healthy boundary. I will read at least one chapter of my novel each night, or my book, or my magazine, or I'll listen to another podcast. Why is it healthy? Providing ourselves with soft limits, or something more attainable, does not overstretch our boundaries, and it will not feel overwhelming if we don't achieve that goal. In other words, no blame or shame is required. If we can't get to that boundary, if we step over the boundary or have somebody step over ours, you know what? Take the hit, be responsible, say, you know what? Yep, I messed up. Let me work on that and fix it. The next time this arises, I now know what it feels like to slip. So those are examples of healthy boundaries. Now we're going to talk about unhealthy boundaries and the reasons why they're unhealthy. And I know some of these are going to be just outright obvious, but you know what? It's always good to talk about it and hear it. Here's the first one. If my boyfriend hits me one more time, I will leave. Why is that unhealthy? We were talking about a similar situation in the healthy boundaries, so what makes this one unhealthy? Folks, he's already hit you. Leaving is a must now, not tomorrow, and to say one more time is one too many. If my boyfriend hits me one more time, that means you've accepted him hitting you already. That's unacceptable behavior. That's why it's unhealthy. That's not a boundary, folks. That's codependence. You're allowing something to happen another time. How about this one? I'm going to stop drinking tomorrow, but today I really need a drink. Why is it unhealthy? Okay, we may frequently defer to a tomorrow. We need to commit to action today. Otherwise, it's merely an empty boundary and of no use to us, as we tend to guilt ourselves after slipping or having setbacks. I'm going to stop drinking tomorrow. That means we don't have commitment. Why wait till tomorrow? That means you're letting your addiction control your life still. Wait till tomorrow. No. Now. Take care of it now. I don't want to pick up my kids' toys anymore. Why is this unhealthy? Anymore? The word anymore in that sentence means that we have given in time and time again already. It shows a lack of commitment to change our discipline. I don't want to pick up my kids' toys. I don't want to also kind of represents an empty boundary and will rarely be taken seriously. I don't want to pick up my kids' toys, but I'm gonna. That's what that says. Another unhealthy boundary. I'll just have one more bowl of ice cream. Why is it unhealthy? An eating addiction requires strong limitations and a clear understanding that it is unhealthy, both physically and emotionally, to indulge in the concept of just one more of anything. Building limits and sticking to them are the only way to make that unhealthy boundary a healthy one. Another unhealthy boundary. I hate it when people write about nothing all day on social media. Why is that unhealthy? Well, first question you ask yourself is, how do you know people write about nothing all day unless you yourself are on all day reading the nothing everybody writes about? The addiction is not reading nothing. It's being on all day reading nothing. So build limits to how long you log in so that you can begin maybe to wean yourself off of the intensity of the addiction. And the last unhealthy boundary. I'll call my ex one more time for sex and then never again. I mean, come on, folks. You've already understood what healthy boundaries are. You're hearing what unhealthy boundaries are. This is pretty simple for some of us. Sex addicts often believe that sex is the driving force to happiness, or that it's a conquest to mask their inadequacies in other aspects of their lives. It becomes their drug of choice to fall back with someone also degrades that person as well as you. It's hard enough to heal ourselves. Why do you want to drag somebody else back in? So it's a difficult path, but it is not just you. Absolutely difficult. It's always difficult to get past our addictions or our addictive behaviors. We'd all have no addictions if we were all extremely happy and loving people. We need to recognize that we have never been alone in this. We've always had a we to assist us. When we think that our situation is more horrible than anyone else's ever, we're sadly mistaken by that. You can find thousands of other people with worse scenarios than you. And you can also find thousands of more intense situations that people have healed from. You are never going to be alone. So how can we set a healthy boundary? The first step is to find a situation that requires a boundary. Write down one thing that you struggle with most frequently. There may be many. Let's start one step at a time. We want to learn how to set boundaries one at a time. Now, with that one issue that we have, that struggle, list as many solutions for that struggle that you can come up with. How many boundaries can you make for that struggle? If we can come up with more options, we can better solve the boundary issues for each situation. We can eventually find the best boundary that we can set for the situation and become more aware of how boundaries work. If all you do is find one issue and one boundary, when that boundary falls apart or you can't hold on to that boundary, there's no backup plan. That's why it's important to have several options for it, if you can come up with several options. The next part is to put that boundary to the test. By putting the boundary in place, we can see the effects it has on our situation when it arises again. By adhering to our boundary and not wavering, we can clearly see that we can create a safe place for ourselves to continue our healing process. Stop putting your finger on the burner, folks. It's hot. You burned yourself once. The boundary should be, that's hot, it'll hurt. That should be my boundary. Making the boundaries work. So patience is probably the most important piece of creating successful boundaries. You have to prepare yourselves for slipping or fallbacks, as we are basically new to these changes, and we can't expect 100% success every time. So setting something that's an attainable goal with our boundaries will make them more successful. Imagine asking ourselves to never again have our addiction now. That's very unreasonable for the best of us. We set the goal so unreachable. Are we addicted to the concept of failing? So here's an example of a first-time boundary. I get so angry at people. I wish I could control how I feel. My face boils and I want to punch something. A simple start to creating a boundary for this situation is as simple as identifying the fact that we recognize we get angry. It's like patting ourselves on the back for seeing the struggle. And you know what? Job well done. You saw it. You recognized it. Now that we recognize it, what's next? So the mere fact that we don't punch something is a self-made boundary. We believe deeply that punching something is not the right action to take, even though we feel like it. The boundary is the knowing it is wrong to punch something. The next simple boundary for a situation could be asking ourselves why we get angry. What is it that triggers my anger? Asking ourselves this question is setting a soft boundary for safety. Getting physical puts us or someone else at risk of injury. So knowing that we are not hurting ourselves or someone is a boundary for safety. Another example for setting a boundary, I need to stop drinking. A soft boundary for alcoholics, and I'm one of them. I'm a recovered alcoholic, so this is very true to me. A soft boundary for alcoholics could be simply not having that next drink. Even if we hesitate and still have the drink, we start to see the possibility of not having that drink. Begin saying, I will stop drinking, and then begin to believe you will. Another soft boundary could be recognizing the moment when we want that first drink of the day and catching the trigger that makes us think about drinking. Did our spouse yell at us? Did our coworkers yell at us? Did we mess something up at our job? Did it kind of twist us? Did somebody make us angry? And then every time we get angry, we start drinking. Soft boundaries, recognizing where it is. If we usually decide to have that first drink on our way to work in order to cope with the day, then recognizing that it's a trigger is important. Give yourself a choice. Right now, I can say no to that drink. And just by saying that, it can make it turn into a more active boundary. As later today or tomorrow, we may actually say no to that next drink, even though we might have said yes to it. So treat it like practice and begin committing to the words, and it will form. Here's a quote from the co-author of the Path to Recovery series, Laura Lee. She says, "There came a time at the end of 2018 where my friend, who had lived with me for a couple of years, needed to find another place to live for my own sanity. My house didn't feel comfortable to come home to, and my friend, who I called Dad, was now unable to care for many of his own personal needs. It was important to me that my home return to a peaceful state, and him having the codependent desires for me in his life needed to change. I worked diligently to find him another residence, which took several months to obtain. Now, our relationship is more clearly defined with boundaries that were necessary for both him and I." So think about that, folks. Somebody that she really cared about was living with her, but the situation at home became so tense and so intense that she had to actually kick him out. And this person she would call her dad. So imagine that, folks, going through life, kicking your dad to the curb. But you have to make boundaries for yourself to be your happiness and to be in your sanity. Now, she didn't kick him to the curb, she found him a place to live. She set things in motion so that he could be on his own, and the animosity or the tension between the two of them was not going to boil into something really bad. Thank you, folks, for listening into part 1 of our podcast. Part 2 is already up and available for you to listen to as well, and we look forward to seeing you there.